Brooklyn tonight are upset. They're fired up. A homeless shelter is going up, but they say they thought it was going to be affordable housing. So is this really a case of not in our backyard, or is it a true bait and switch? At the heated protest tonight.
So residents of this Brooklyn neighborhood, who you can see right over here, are outraged because they were told by the city that this building was going to become affordable housing, but then those plans changed when the developer of this property decided to turn it into a homeless shelter instead, which will definitely help get people off the streets. However, residents now wonder if the only way they'll ever get affordable homes is to become homeless themselves.
Outrage from a community in Sheepshead Bay, where efforts are now underway to stop the construction of a homeless shelter.
Many residents say they were told the site was intended for affordable housing.
I got a phone call. Did you know that you gave the rights to a homeless shelter? I said, what?
There is absolutely nothing wrong with homeless people, a homeless shelter. It is not about that. It is where it is placed.
Neighbors provided us with documents from as recently as 2023, with developers calling this a residential and mixed-use building and requesting access to their properties to build scaffolding and a construction fence.
Property ownership changed hands between developers. Changing with that was the original proposal that had been approved by the city council.
Lei Long lives directly behind the site and shows us legal letters she's gotten from the developer's lawyers threatening to enforce a contract she signed when she believed this would be housing.
What we signed was not what we agreed upon. They guaranteed that it would not be a homeless shelter, and we have recording.
So protesters are ripping the city for baiting them into approving a housing project only to turn it into a shelter at the last minute. But what nobody's talking about is this highlights the collision course between the middle class's housing crisis and the city's growing homelessness epidemic. Because with average rents in New York eclipsing $3,000 per month across the city, working class budgets are increasingly being squeezed at a time when the city claims it's low on resources for police and public transit, but always seems to find plenty of resources for housing the homeless, like the 40,000 plus asylum seekers who currently live in former luxury hotels. And even though this new facility is going to house homeless families, residents here are furious because since 2022, they've been told by the city that an affordable housing complex was coming here that was going to have over 100 apartments, only for those plans to be tossed aside when a new developer bought the property and pitched a new plan to create a government-funded homeless shelter instead, which is probably going to make them filthy rich. And that brings us to the real reason protesters are over here right now refusing to leave. They can't outspend their own government when it comes to housing, and the government gets all of its money from its residents, creating an endless loop of poverty where residents get crushed by taxes and fees trying to provide for themselves, only to have their progressive government turn the tables on them and outbid them during a housing crisis. And as you're about to see, if this project moves forward, it will most certainly not be the last affordable housing project that gets replaced. So this sign here explains the position of many of the residents with why this new facility is so controversial. Mayor Adams and city officials helped illegal migrants with $6.9 billion from the city budget. And none of that money is going towards affordable housing, which would really help this community. But the big question is, if this site was approved as affordable housing, how on earth did that change at the last minute?
Oh, they came, they got a 911 call.
The Sheepshead Bay community is all riled up, feeling like it's been duped.
I got a phone call. Did you know that you gave the rights to a homeless shelter? I said, what?
That's not what was initially presented to Community Board 15.
This was affordable housing as well as rental units. It was not supposed to be.
So as you can see, residents are pretty furious. They thought new apartments were coming here, but that's no longer the case after they were convinced to support the development of this site. This building was supposed to become over over 100 affordable apartments. And there was going to be commercial space on the ground floor that would have brought new residents and economic activity to this neighborhood, which is obviously underserved. You've got stores here that went out of business years ago. And as you can probably tell, the area itself is not full of skyscrapers like Manhattan, that's for sure. But now residents will be forced to endure months of construction activity for a project they never agreed on. This is what you were told was coming here, right?
Yes.
This beautiful housing project.
No more.
No more.
That's crazy.
Cheating hour,
Yeah.
cheating.
They do the homeless shelter.
This picture is of the 207,000 square foot development that was supposed to go here. The residential component was going to be half of that. There were going to be 148 residential units, 45 of those permanent affordable housing. And even though only 45 of the apartments were going to be pegged as affordable housing forever, the construction of over 100 market rate apartments would also help alleviate the supply crunch here, bringing down prices. Because if you increase the supply of apartments, you bring down prices, as there are now more places on the market for people to choose from. Now landlords have to compete with each other. That would really help the middle class, but I guess it's not going to anymore.
Hundreds stood outside the construction fencing in protest.
There is absolutely nothing wrong with homeless people, a homeless shelter. It is not about that. It is where it is placed.
Just a short walk away from Jane Lipkovich's daycare.
We are also concerned because these are our neighborhood.
Now, part of the reason residents here are worried is because they know New York is a soft on crime, progressive city. And one of the worries that they have is that once the homeless shelter opens up here, certain things may start taking place in the community that don't happen right now, like increases in the overall level of crime. One resident told me that they're worried because many of the homeless shelters in town do not let residents remain on the property all day. They have to leave during certain hours, and if they have to leave, then that means they're just going to be out and about in the community, which doesn't have a homeless facility here right now and does have a lot of schools and a lot of public parks. And residents are saying that there should be a place for the homeless, just not necessarily in the heart of a residential neighborhood that doesn't have the resources to accommodate them. And perhaps one example of this is just how different Midtown Manhattan is, where you happen to have a lot of commercial buildings, but also a plethora of homeless facilities. And over here, you'll see there's a Dollar Tree, but there's a problem. You don't have Dollar Tree in Midtown Manhattan because their prices aren't high enough to accommodate all of the extra security measures you need at a place like CVS to keep the items on the shelves and away from prying fingers. And although opportunistic criminals exist across every social and economic group in town, if shoplifting were to increase in this neighborhood after the shelter is built and businesses like Dollar Tree shut down, the community will be worse off. And although we have no way of knowing if the presence of a shelter here will bring increased crime to the neighborhood at all, because it hasn't happened yet, this has happened in other areas of town where homeless shelters have suddenly been created, forcing stores to take drastic measures. But what's at the heart of the issue here is the perceived level of unfairness this community is experiencing.
Among the hundreds of people who came out to this protest tonight, fired up, are not only those who have safety concerns, but also those who say affordable housing would have been crucial for this neighborhood. Lena Chen.
So the reason you have perpetual protests at this location now is because you've got an entire community of people here who are slaving away to keep a roof over their heads and provide for themselves, and they feel like they were lied to. They were convinced by city leaders to come out and support the development of this project and to get behind it because it would make things better here. And it was easy for people here to get behind the idea of more affordable apartments, but now those plans have been thrown out the window and suddenly changed, and no one was told. There weren't any meetings, there was no community input. I think it's pretty obvious why there wasn't any community input. We're getting that input right now. Oh, police are back.
They are waving at us.
But here's where things get even worse, because apparently neighbors who live around here and have property near this facility, they were told that in order for any development to take place here, they would have to give up some of the rights to their property to allow construction equipment to be placed there. And the residents who agreed to this, they thought they'd be supporting their community by lowering housing prices here, but as it turns out, that's no longer the case.
Lane Long lives directly behind the site and shows us legal letters she's gotten from the developer's lawyers threatening to enforce a contract she signed when she believed this would be housing.
What we signed was not what we agreed upon.
We were sort of threatened by legal proceedings if we do not follow what they're suggesting.
Isn't that crazy? These folks, some of them gave up the right to their own property to make something happen that everybody was in unanimous agreement about. And then that changed at the last minute, and those rights are gone. And although there's no properties here, apparently there are people who live on the other side of this, on the other street, and now their lives are going to be disrupted by potentially months, if not years of construction that they never agreed to.
Affordable house. They liar. They say told people that's going to be an affordable house. Decided, everybody decided, but after they decided, they changed to the owner.
Think about those people. They were told, sign here so that we can have affordable housing.
Exactly.
Everyone would want them to sign. If they said no, because we don't trust the city, everybody at this protest would be protesting them.
Yes.
So they had to sign.
Yes.
And then the city changed the plan on them.
They changed the plan
They
on them.
totally got them. That's terrible.
They changed the owner.
It's terrible.
That's the bad thing.
And again, look at these photos. This is what people were shown. This is what people were pressured into agreeing to. And when you look at how badly everybody here is in favor of affordable housing, it's pretty obvious that the people who had to sign for construction equipment to go on their properties, they were under a lot of pressure. If they had said no, all of these people would be protesting the small handful of neighbors who don't trust the city and who don't trust their elected representatives, who are telling them that a big project is coming here, showing them these pictures right here. This is what people would be protesting against had neighbors held out, but no. And although a lot of people here are upset with the new developer of this property and with the local councilwoman who apparently should have known about this, you're gonna be shocked when you find out who had the chance to stop this plan and didn't. So there's a couple of things we don't know. First, we don't know what the overall effect is going to be of having a homeless shelter in this neighborhood because it hasn't been built yet. There's a chance that many of the concerns out here might be entirely unfounded. But what we do know is that the city itself had the opportunity to make sure that affordable housing went up over here, which is what residents here were promised, and they didn't keep that promise.
It would be the district's first long-term shelter operated by nonprofit developer West Hab. A spokesperson for West Hab says the organization had no involvement in the original plan, adding, "We submitted a proposal to the city as a family shelter, gained approval, purchased the property, and all protocols were followed," adding there was...
So here's what happened. The affordable housing developer backed out of their initial project, but they already had contracts and the right to build on this site, which they then sold to somebody else. But the group that they sold it to didn't have permission to build here. They needed to get that from the city. So what did they do? They went and got it secretly without anybody here knowing. But now the question is, why didn't the city go out and find another affordable housing developer so that a similar project could still get built here? Obviously, that's what the local community was in favor of. That's what people were sold on. And it doesn't really make sense why the city wouldn't go and find someone to take up the work that was left off, unless they either tried and couldn't find anybody or had some secret reason for agreeing to the homeless shelter that we may never be informed about.
Thought this was going to be affordable housing, which they say the area could use. City Councilwoman Ina Vernikov attended that rally. The City Council and Community Board backed the lot becoming affordable housing. Then she says development plans changed without input.
So here's where things get even more interesting. There have been other homeless shelter facilities that have gone up in areas which faced a lot of local opposition, but apparently this isn't one of those neighborhoods. The local councilwoman says she was duped as well, just like everybody else who was here. City Hall apparently didn't tell her what their new plans were for this location either. And now all they can do is tell their constituents to call the mayor's office and voice opposition to this. It's terrible.
This is exactly what happened to my friend on 86th Street, and she was like, her family didn't even want the affordable housing because they were concerned that, it will affect their foundation. So they said no right off the bat. Look out for yourself, basically.
Well, it shows that you can't trust the city.
No.
Because if the city comes in and says, hey, we're going to do this great thing for your neighborhood, sign here, and you do, and then they change the plan, now what?
Right. So
you can't change back. You already agreed.
So now there's like a mistrust in the community that, why even ask?
Well, what you've got to realize is government funding for your private business, that's something that the homeless industrial complex here really benefits from. If they can get government money to to build something that's always going to be better than whatever money they can get from a community by way of a private business that has to serve this community with things like apartments or another business. And if you think about it, it's a real conflict of interest because money controls politics. And if the city can bring in some wealthy organization hidden beneath a bunch of nonprofits to build something, knowing that money's going to come back to them in some way, the chances of them not doing it are non-existent. But as you can see from a lot of the signs here, what people really want is for folks to have the opportunity to take care of themselves. And even if no affordable housing were to come here, just allowing the construction of any type of apartment on this site would be better than what's coming here. Adding housing to a market at any price brings down prices, even if you build luxury apartments, which most people are against. And that's because of a process described here called a migration chain. Households who have otherwise occupied cheaper units move to new units, reducing demand and prices for the housing they leave behind. This process then repeats itself a second time when people move into those units that are now vacant, leaving their units behind. And allowing that to start happening here would create economic activity that would benefit this neighborhood on an eternal basis, because now you've got more going on here. You've got more jobs. You've got more people who are taking care of themselves instead of relying on the government to take care of them. What do you think about the idea of putting a homeless shelter here instead of the affordable homes residents were promised and were told to sign off on? Were the residents lied to and duped? Or should they have known better than to trust the city at all, even though the city promised them a stellar new building with sprawling retail that was going to make the community better? And do they have any recourse other than standing here 24 hours a day like the protesters plan on to make sure that nothing gets built here that they haven't agreed to? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.